A lot of people ask me that because, especially in America, because people have a certain view of, army and military here. The thing is that Pakistan Army, especially the officer class, uh, are trained to be good readers and writers. And I was even doubly lucky because when I got out of the military academy, now in Pakistan Army, if you are an officer, the ability to read carefully and write carefully and write good English is an added advantage. It is never considered a weakness. But the battalion that I went into had some really learned senior officers. I mean, there were people who had read like 14 volumes of Toynbee and Capital Volume 1 and Capital Volume 2. They would talk about all, Sartre and all these philosophers. And so when you go into a battalion as a young officer, the very first day you go and meet the commanding officer and report for duty. And so the commanding officer welcomes you and says, okay, here is what we have planned for you, go ahead. So my commanding officer, I went and met him, and then he says, stop by the second in command's office, and he has a reading list for you. So I go to the second in command's office, and he gives me a list of 100 books. Our battalion had a wonderful library, and he said, you have 1 year to read these books, and occasionally, every once a while, so every battalion around 11 o'clock, since they are from the colonial period, would have a gathering of officers in the staff room, which was called tea break. And that's when all the officers would fall back to the main center, wherever they were. And the reason was they'll sit over a cup of tea and some snacks, but the CO would tell them informally, hey, this is what is going on, this is what I want you to do. So what they also used that hour of tea break was for junior officers to come up and give their presentations. So I don't even know how many presentations I did. So it was a mixed lot of reading. There were some military history books, there were some literature books, a lot of Shakespeare. So I landed in a battalion that was highly invested in training their officers in the arts and in teaching. And then that I already had a reading habit, from my boarding school. So when I left the army and came to United States to study, I was like, what can I do? I was like, I will study literature because I love literature. And so that transition was easier. And then once I got into a program and discovered post-colonial studies, I was like, I can do this. And then I fell in love with it. But by and large, it wasn't really a hard transition. It was something that I was already doing informally as an officer, and then I started doing it as a way of life. Okay, so I've met other students who are interested in post-colonial studies, but there seems to be a good deal of professors who tend to shun those pursuits. Yes, obviously. There are people, and they are in every department, not just here, who consider post-colonial studies not to be worthy of their attention, and kind of discourage people from pursuing it. Keep in mind that if you ever go and look up the MLA job list, which comes out every September, there are categories of jobs, periods: literature of the British Isles, 18th century, early American. Post-colonial studies is still a category there. There are jobs that are listed under that category. So professionally, it is a viable field of study. But otherwise, too, it's an exciting field of study. You can make whatever you want of it, as long as you're dealing with something that deals with colonialism and deals with issues of equity, justice. You can use post-colonial theory to write an American studies paper if your professor would allow you to do that. But yeah, I've seen a lot of hesitance on part of some of the people to consider it a field worthy of, I don't know, their acknowledgement, I would say. It doesn't bother me at all because, I love doing what I do. I enjoy it. people read my work. You know, I have 3 books published already. The fourth one is with the publishers. So there is, and I loved writing them. That's the beauty of it. So I am very pragmatic. If you are already in a class and you propose to a professor, I would like to look at it from a post-colonial perspective, and the professor says, no, that's not a worthy field of study, you don't need to fight them on that, because you're not going to win. So you just go and write the paper that they want you to read. But then never take their class again, of course. And tell others also, hey, guys, this person wants things this way. And then go and take a class with someone who would be willing to entertain whatever you want to do. I don't recommend fighting people who are so entrenched in their way of looking at it, because they take it personally, and then they can harm you. I mean, not just students. I mean, they can harm even tenured professors. So that's my pragmatical approach. I think 12 years ago, I would have said, no way, you should stand your ground and fight. I think I'm more pragmatic now in these things, especially when I advise students. So that's pretty much what my advice is, because they are not going to change their point of view. I mean, they are the kind of people who, Jenny usually says, these are the people who says, my mind is already made up and no amount of arguing is going to change it. So there is no way they will change their opinion. It mostly also comes from certain insecurities, but that's the fact of life. I have had to protect my students in a dissertation defense, where one of my students had pre-constituted her committee before she became a post-colonialist. And when we went into defense, the first question from a colleague was asking her to defend the field itself. And I had to intervene and say, this is an established question. Okay, post-colonial studies is an established field of study. She shouldn't have to answer that question. But that question came from this place of insecurity or maybe superiority. So, we have to deal with that. I have to deal with that.